My name is Marche. I am a warrior in a land called Ivalice. Can you please help me destroy the crystals so I can leave?
You may call me Ritz, but you may not use my sword, spells, or magic without asking. They are dangerous. If you call, I'll explain.
Mute is my name. Feel free to call. Otherwise, I may become irritable.
The people of Ivalice are standing by to talk about Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, only on Game Boy Advance. Rated E for everyone.
Most of you know of the powerhouse RPG that is Final Fantasy Tactics, even though it is a spin-off of the main series. It has famously remained many fans' favorite game. This is mostly due to a complex and well-thought-out battle system that takes full advantage of the tactical approach to combat. Final Fantasy Tactics tells a mature story with conflicts based on politics and belief, which has sadly proven to be historically accurate. I mention all of this because today we're going to talk about the spin-off of the spin-off. Okay, that may be a bit derivative, but was fun to say. The development team did initially set out to just port Final Fantasy Tactics to the wildly successful Game Boy Advance, but then quickly pivoted into a new and unique story while retaining the overall style and combat systems of its inspiration. This is what led us to Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Hello friends, both old and new. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is a tactical RPG for the Game Boy Advance that was released in 2003. Developed and published by Square, right before they publicly merged with Enix to become the company that everyone knows now, but they were actually separate companies at one point in time. The team behind this game were mostly made up of former Tactics Ogre developers, and many reviewers noted these influences after release. The game is very dialogue heavy, but honestly what RPG wasn't back then. Everything you see is always done in the same engine as normal gameplay, no fancy FMV on this one. This isn't meant to be a criticism, as everyone knows how popular pixel art is and has become. This one shot of the main character's bedroom is really only used in the establishing scenes, but I have never wanted to live in a fictional place any more than when I look at this. Just the small details such as the snow falling outside the window, the little kettle steaming on the stove, it's all just so perfect and cozy. I honestly made a wallpaper for my PC using this image while making this video. It's just that good. The amazing visuals carry throughout the game, although I will admit that some of the battle areas can feel a bit repetitive after a few hours. I hope you do have a few hours set aside for this one, as it's not exactly a short or fast game. This one comes from the old school JRPG philosophy of 40 hours plus. I'm sure you could optimize a path through and trim that down, but you will find yourself in long conversations fairly often. I really recommend not rushing this one, to be honest. The story has some very surface level criticisms toward being childish, but I promise that if you keep going past the early parts, you will find the depth this franchise is known for. Besides an amazing art style and direction, this game is also famous for its tactical combat system. Instead of lining up and taking turns whacking each other like other Final Fantasy games, the tactics games see you moving around on a grid-based system in isometric 3D. This creates a lot of depth just in the positioning of your party, with their individual stats affecting things such as movement, range, and targeting. This starts out simple enough with just basic flanking and melee strategies, eventually growing more complex due to ranged and AoE abilities. Maybe you bait in a couple of melee enemies so you can line them up for a heavy-hitting black magic spell. Just be careful, friendly fire is possible in this game. The absolute best system in this game has to be its take on the job system. Jobs have existed in Final Fantasy from the very beginning, but the tactics games took them to a whole new level. It starts out as a pretty simple system with all of the recognizable jobs you know: Soldier, White Mage, Black Mage, and Monk, but you can eventually unlock up to 34 total jobs for your party members to learn. Party members are made up of members of your clan, which you find yourself essentially in charge of pretty early, and you can even change their jobs throughout the story. There are jobs that are unique to certain races that are known as expert jobs, that you unlock pretty late in the game. This is where the true depth shines through. It can be extremely satisfying to build out a unique party of heavy-hitting classes that can surround and eradicate any enemies. Right up until you break a law and catch a penalty card. Yeah, you heard me right, and you probably also knew this was coming up. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is pretty infamous for its judge and rule mechanic. This is unique to the land of Ivalice and sees powerful NPCs, at least they are implied to be powerful, called judges that will show up to preside over an engagement or battle. These judges are heavily armored and ride chocobos, which give them an impressive movement range. Each day, a new law or set of laws will go into effect. These can be as arbitrary as no items, which the game will use as its scenario to explain this mechanic, all the way up to specifics like no spears. These laws also carry different levels of punishment, with the harshest seeing a character immediately sent to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect 200 gil, jail.
Right to jail, right away.
You can thankfully bail your party members out, but this mechanic soured many players against this game. I fully admit that it can be frustrating, but the game does start to give you workarounds later in the story. A fun spoiler-free way to lower the stress over laws is to just take advantage of the passage of time and travel around the map until the laws shift in your favor. The main story of this game is set in Ivalice, and while this world would later go on to be the focal point of Final Fantasy XII and others, this was our first experience with it. This is a medieval-inspired fantasy world filled with all the usual Final Fantasy suspects such as Moogles and Chocobos, but Final Fantasy Tactics Advance introduced a few new elements that would become staples of Ivalice. These mostly being the Viera, Benga, and New Moi races. That's right, Final Fantasy XIV fans, your bunny girls started here. Our main character of March, although you can rename him as you choose, is a young boy in either his tweens or early teens who recently moved to the remote town of St. Ivalice. This setting is used for the opening scenes and establishes more than just the personality traits of our main cast. It's based on the real world. Tactics Advanced opens us up at a snowball fight at school where we see several kids bullying both the new kid and another small child named Mute. A tough girl named Ritz stands up to these bullies and even switches teams to support Mutant March. The game is being moderated by the children's teacher, establishing that there are rules and that this is an organized activity that the kids are used to. More on that in a moment. This scene is used to establish how our main characters feel about each other and used to seed some of the following events that will drive the party together. I don't really want to break down the entire story, as these big multi-hour RPGs really benefit from letting yourself get immersed due to exposure, and a lot of people have covered it. I do want to point out what I see most people miss when talking about this scene. Yes, it mainly establishes character traits, but due to the world and setting being birthed from the wish of a child, this battle becomes the framework for every conflict to come. The entire reason judges and laws exist is because of this child's perspective into conflict. I think this is why the combat can feel lower stakes compared to some games. The worst thing a kid can think of is getting punished or restricted as opposed to your typical life or death battle. This was always an interesting insight into the origins of this fantasy world. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance deals with themes of growing up, escapism, and the classic tale of a journey to get home. You can just skip through the dialogue and continue to get that delicious tactical combat if that's your preference, but I think you could be pleasantly surprised by what you experience if you give this game a chance. Either way, this is a beautiful game for one of the best handheld consoles ever that really deserves to be ported to the Switch at the absolute minimum. Could you imagine a remake of this game or possibly a new sequel utilizing modern assets and tech? Something like Octopath Traveler or the recent Live Alive remake would look amazing. Live Alive? Judge me below. It did receive a sequel a few years later in 2007, but it told a new story and was part of the overall Ivalice Alliance series that came out with Final Fantasy XII. This did lead to a few character cameos between the two games, as well as the shared setting of Ivalice, but that's a subject for a future video, and I'd be lying if I said that Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2 means as much as me as the first. I'm sure that it's someone's favorite, it just isn't mine. So that's the notes on Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, a game that I sunk many hours into in my youth, and decidedly less on a recent replay, mostly due to years of practice and optimization. If this has sparked any interest to check this one out, the easiest way will probably be through emulation. Maybe if enough of us make a stink about it online, it will also come to the Switch as part of the new expansion pack features. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something as well. Let me know your thoughts on this game below in the comments. As always, I appreciate any and all of your time. I'm Dr. Ursa, and I hope you have a great day.